she said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm on my way to something, ma'am." I said, "Why?" She said, I know where you're going." I said, "Okay." She said, "If you get hurt," she goes, "it's not gonna be in the line of duty." And I said, "Well, ma'am," I said, respectfully, I was like, "there would have to be an investigation first, and then I would have to be found not in the line of duty, but I'm not doing anything that's damaging anything in the line of duty." I was getting ready to go to an MMA fight. I was gonna be participating in an MMA fight. Well,
Yeah. No matter how hard life is, we got a Charlie Mike. Yeah. Let's go.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Charlie Mike, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raul, and your co-host, William.
Man, you're back to forgetting your name again?
Man, I did.
Yep.
I feel like we've done this a couple of times today.
I know. So, yes, welcome to an episode of Charlie Mike, the podcast from Pearland Podcast Studio.
Right here in Pearland, Texas, south of Houston.
And it's crazy, bro.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. I feel so good. I'm really excited. I feel, said this over and over again, but we have a great string of guests. And man, you guys are bringing it every week. So thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you to all of our guests that come on before. It's been phenomenal. I'm excited to bring on many more.
It definitely has. It's been and it's been surreal, to be honest with you. It's very humbling too, man, to see that people are reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, man, I want to be on the podcast," or things like that. It's something that
it's exciting, you know.
It is, man. I knew we were gonna get to this point. I just wasn't sure when.
Yeah.
You know.
And you know what? And you guys heard a third voice on here, and this guest came to us because of a mutual contact of ours. And she said, "Oh, I know who would be a fantastic guest for you." And so that third voice you hear today is Mr. Brian Marvin. Hello, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Man, it's exciting. We finally linked up, bro.
Yeah, we were trying to do this last week, and it was just a bad string of events, but I'm glad we were able to get to it today.
Yes.
Yeah, no worries, man.
So thank you for coming on. Really, I think, like I said, I feel, Miss Patricia was just in studio before, so I feel she was very, very passionate about us trying to get you on, and she really did everything she could to get that connected. And I think that goes a long way for you and your character, because she was very adamant, like, this is the person. This is the one you got to get on.
She's great. I've known her for a really long time, and I appreciate you guys having me on, and hopefully I can share some insightful things. So.
Yeah, man. So let's start off, brother. Let's start off telling us a little bit about yourself. Where you're from, upbringing.
I was born and raised in a little town called Danville, Illinois, outside, right on the Illinois-Indiana border.
It sounds country.
South, yeah, it is. Well, it's a city town, but not far from the country. My grandparents lived out in the country, so I spent a lot of time out there after my parents got divorced. So I kind of grew up in the country, but then lived there most of my life, and then moved to Ohio a little bit, did some high school and wrestled a little bit in college. I really had no business going to college, but I got a scholarship to wrestle, so who's going to pass up a scholarship to wrestle?
Yeah,
so
right.
I went, and I really wasn't mature in a lot of things. As far as school, I really had no want or desire to be there, but I wanted to wrestle. So once the NCAA told me that, you actually have to go to school to participate in sports, I stopped going to college, moved back to Illinois, and worked a little bit, and decided I didn't want to be just a regular laborer, I guess, for the rest of my life. And I needed to get some maturity, some motivation, and to do some things. And I did want to wrestle and go back to school, I thought at the time. So I originally, when I was in high school, I was going to join the military, but then I got the scholarship to wrestle, so I didn't. So then I went back to that original plan of let's join. At that time,
could you tell us what year that was?
That would have been I graduated high school in 1994. 47 years old. I just turned 47 last month.
Man, you don't look it at all.
No, I thought you were I say our age.
Yeah.
We're not that far off, bro. But yeah.
Yeah, 94. And then I joined in 95. So I stopped going to school that December. I just went the first semester, and then moved back to Illinois and was working and stuff. My brother was a senior in high school. We're Irish twins. He's a year behind me. Like literally, I don't know how my parents or especially my mom made it through life. Like we were hellions growing up, like terrible kids. I mean, like I'm not sure we're much better now, but we were terrible, terrible kids. We put her through so much hell growing up. And he was actually in the delayed entry program at the time. And so he's like, "Hey, come talk to my recruiter, talk to my recruiter, talk to my recruiter." And I'm like, yeah, I'm busy doing like chasing girls and partying, you know what I mean? Which is the reason I didn't stay in school.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I eventually talked to his recruiter. And what's funny is when I he lived like 2 hours away from me with my dad. And when I went up there, all my friends were like, "Don't do it, man. Because you go up there and talk to him, you're going to join." And I'm like, well, what else am I doing here? You know what I mean? There's
Right.
like nothing here. And so I went up and talked to the recruiter. I think it was like a Saturday, and that dude had to have been like salivating at the mouth, trying to write as fast as he could that application, like trying to get that thing there, just like hand jamming that bad boy into MEPS. Like you got to walk. Like I got one hot. Let's get this guy on there. So I literally joined. I think I talked to him on Friday. I don't even know if I think I took the physical, maybe even on that Saturday or Monday. I mean, like very short time after that, took the physical, enlisted immediately. And then I had to wait like 44 days to leave for basic training. That's when I was a tanker. So going to Fort Knox, had to wait for that to happen. So then I went just back to my friends. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you joined. It's
We
going to be,"
told you.
yeah, telling me all these terrible things that are going to happen. Of course, they have no idea. And I'm like, "All right, man, cool. That's great. Like whatever. I'm going to be in hell, I guess." And then, I would go back and they're doing the same old bullshit that they always were.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, come on, guys. Like, you got to do something in life, So, originally the plan was to just do a few years. I joined in Illinois. So how they had the plan in Illinois is very similar to that, how they have in Texas. If you join, you can go to a state school and tuition and stuff like that. So my plan was to go back to Illinois State, walk on to wrestle, use the GI Bill to live off of and things like that, just to be able to focus on that and then be a high school wrestling coach. That's what was my original plan.
Very cool.
To coach wrestling at the high school level. And so then when I enlisted, as things were going along, I was having a real good time in the Army and really saw myself not being successful getting out, going back to college at that time. And so each time then it came time to re-enlist, I would weigh my options, like, where am I at in life? Is it time for me to get out? Is it time for me to stay in? What's the best thing for me and my family and my situation? And so each time it would come to, no, let's keep this thing rolling, until it got to like 11 years. And it's like, there's no way I'm stopping at this point. You know what I mean? Like once it got to 11 and I was like, nope, but like I can do anything that and really did do anything and put up with a lot of stuff over that next 9 years. Cause I was in recruiting command for a long, long time. Like 15 years I was in recruiting command. I tried to get out of, so I got selected. That's how the whole story went. Well, I don't know how much
You
wanna get
got
into
it,
this
man.
now,
Go
but,
for it.
when I first enlisted, I was a tanker and got stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. And so that unit had just moved there from Germany. So that like literally that whole unit picked up, moved and transplanted to Fort Lewis. I think like 1 year prior to me getting there, maybe 2. I don't even think it was 2, but literally the whole unit moved there. So it was an entire unit PCS. Those people that were stationed together in Germany were now stationed together in
Oh, wow.
Lewis. So the entire culture, it wasn't like there were, few people came in and out, but they needed to move that entire unit. So when I got there, it was into a culture that those people had already been working together for years.
Yeah.
And now it was an Oconus move. So now they were going to be there another couple of years together. So I got into, as a young, 19-year-old kid, got into some cliques. So I got in trouble a little bit when I first got into the Army and overcame that, you know what I mean? But then it got to the point where I had been at Lewis for like 4 or 5 years at that time. I'd worked my way up through after getting in trouble for a little bit, worked my way up through and I recovered. I got promoted all the way up to staff sergeant pretty quickly after. I stayed at EU1 for like 2 years. Pretty close to
On
2
the
years.
cuff, like, yeah, man, if you don't get promoted, you ain't staying in.
But the thing about it is, it was a shitty situation. I had how it went down was I was on the platoon sergeant's tank, and when I got in trouble, like he caught a lot of heat.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was going to have to put up with a lot of shit. And I have no problem dealing with that. So, like, literally for years, it was as long as he was assigned there, it was like, "Hey, whatever detail," and he would just look at me. I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." Like, I know it's my duty to, like, I'm on that detail. Like, I was like the grunt guy of that. Anything that needed to be done, like, you're the guy that's doing it. You like, because they gave me a choice. Like, you want to get in, you want to stay out. I wrecked a motorcycle. I'd been drinking.
Mm.
Instead of getting a DUI, I got Article 15. You want to get out, you want to stay in. Like I'd only been there a very short amount of time, and I'm like, give me a chance. Like I fucked up this situation. Like I'm a good kid, but please give me a chance.
Yeah.
And so they did, but that platoon sergeant like wasn't feeling it. He's
At
like, all
all.
right, I'm gonna give you a chance, and I'm gonna work your ass until another guy got there, and then this new platoon sergeant came in, and he saw he didn't know what was happening, but when he got there, he was like, "Why are you an E1?" And so I was like, "Well, when I got here, I messed up, and then since then I've been here." And he's like, "No, we need to rectify this situation." So like literally, I got promoted immediately, almost immediately of him getting there and making an assessment to E2. And then as quickly as they could get me promoted to E3, I got promoted to E3. And then as quickly as I could get promoted to E4, and then I was moving up the ranks as a gunner. I got promoted to corporal, which there weren't even a lot of corporals at that time, but that's what they wanted to do. They promoted me to corporal at that time. And so I obviously had made a change in my life. You know what I mean? So I got promoted pretty quickly to staff sergeant, and I'd been there at Fort Lewis for a while, and I'd heard all of these horror stories about Korea. And like usually Lewis, the bouncing point was go to Korea, work on tanks, Camp Casey, go there for a year, come right back to Fort Lewis. Like that's what at that time, that's what the rotation was. And I was like, I had just gotten married. My daughter was getting ready to get born, and they're like, "Hey, you're going to Korea." And I'm like, I really don't want to miss the first year of my daughter's life. I was like, "Send me to Germany." I'm like, "There's still tanks over there." They're like, "Well, we can't." I said, I was trying to go to a bunch of different places, and they said, "Okay, we're going to send you to recruiting." I'm like, "Well, I mean, that's better than nothing." So better than going to Korea in my mind at that time. So
Dun, dun, dun.
you're right. So I went to recruiting. So I went to recruiting. And so then I got to recruiting, and then it was really a great situation because I went to back to the Midwest. They're like, "You're from the
Oh, wow.
Midwest. We're going to send you back to the Midwest, but we're not going to send you to Illinois." Because I was like, I tried to go back to where my dad lived, because that was the original plan. Get out of the army, move back to Illinois, go to college. So I was like, well, if I could do that while in recruiting, well, let's try to do that. Get back to close to home. Well, I got pretty close. I got back to Iowa. Well, I had wrestled my whole life up to that point. And when I got to Iowa, what better place in the world
Mm.
to be involved with wrestling than in Iowa? And so I immediately tried to negotiate a way to become an assistant coach, a volunteer assistant coach on a high school wrestling team. And so then through that, I mean, I really, really enjoyed that. Was like kind of the start of the enjoyment of being able to help people. You know what I mean? As a leader, all the courses as you go through in the army, you're trying to help soldiers, but you're really trying to influence them to accomplish the mission. You know what I
Right, right.
mean? You care about their feelings, you want growth and development, but overall, the mission is what you're trying to accomplish. But when it came to this situation, it was like I want to accomplish the mission of getting people in the army, but I can't do it in a manner that people are going to be like, all that guy wants is to put people in the army. I had to do it in a manner that people are like, well, this guy really cares about what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
And what I found with, if you showed them that you really do generally take concern about their lives and what they want to do, then recruiting is easy at that point. I put in a person from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a Medal of Honor winner. Like, he earned the Medal of Honor
Yeah.
out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Wow.
And so, seeing, and that was the other thing that was super rewarding to me. There's another guy that I put in the army, and he was probably the last person that I put in the army as a regular recruiter out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, one of the last ones. And I don't even know if I got credit for that guy. It was so late on in me leaving, but I had such a relationship with some of these people that this guy, they would have probably been 2003, maybe I put him in the army, and we're in 2023 now. 20 years ago, I put him in the army. He reached out to me like 4 months ago, 3 months ago. "Hey, man, I don't know if you remember me." I'm like, "Of course I remember you, man." He filled out his whole life story for me, told me about everything that he had done in the Army, everything that he had been able to accomplish, all of his family, all of this stuff, everything that's happened after the fact. And man, just to be able to see that thing was super, super cool for me.
Was he still in the service?
No, he was out at this time.
Okay.
Moved back to Iowa, but back in Cedar Rapids, doing great things back there.
Yeah.
But to make a long story short, I got selected I was in recruiting for a while, and then 9/11 happened. And then I was like, man, I love helping people, but I joined the Army to do other things, not this. And so I had just switched to become a full-time recruiter because I enjoyed it. And I was like, is there any way I can go back? And they said, no, you're stuck in this now. So then I was like, well, I'm going to be in here for a long time. There are a lot of different positions that you can do in recruiting. So then I tried to work to get to some better, cooler jobs, which I eventually did later on.
So you brought up 9/11, and we always like to talk about that a little bit with our guests because a lot of us experienced the same situation or similar situations. So where were you?
And we had just got done taking a PT test in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We had taken a PT test right along the waterfront, and I was in my house taking a shower, and my wife was in the living room, and my daughter had this like little basket that she was in, and her parents were actually there. I don't know why they were in town or what happened, but her parents were like sitting on the couch, and she's like, "Hey, you got to come see this." And I was like, "That can't be real. That can't be real." And so upon seeing it, I was like, "Man, I've got to get back to figure out what's going on." You know what I mean? We had literally there was barely any cell phones at that time. You know what I mean? So communication was really, really minimal. So we were like, man, I got to get back to this recruiting station and find out like what the plan is from here, what we're doing, So yeah, I literally just got done taking a PT test and was getting out of the shower at that point, getting ready to go back to work. So it was crazy.
Did you watch the second plane hit?
Yeah, I did. She got me when the first one, she's like, something's going on. A plane hit the building, and then I came out. I was like half dressed, and her parents were sitting on the couch, like looking in amazement. My daughter was just like playing on the ground with this basket. And next thing you know, the second plane hits, and it's like, what the hell is going on at this point? I mean, it was wild.
Yeah, man. Every time, man. Every time.
Yeah.
And we brought it up a few episodes ago, but we like talking about 9/11 because it's a big thing that happened in our lives, and we want to make sure that it's ever present because we are post 9/11 events.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember joining and then seeing the guys like, man, you guys were in before, right? And you were like, what drives that? And I think that's what's interesting about your story is to hear that and to hear your passion about helping people and how you can set them up for a better situation with the military or with the Army specifically. And now being able to like change gears and like you said, you just made that commitment to stay with recruiting. And then it's like, man, this isn't what I want to do. I want to go back.
Well, I mean, it got really around probably 2006, right in that time is probably when it got the toughest in recruiting because we're fighting wars on two places at that time.
Yeah.
Like the news isn't good, everything is, war, deaths, things like that. And you're trying to convince a parent or a kid to come into the Army when for a fact you're going to one of those two places.
Yeah.
Like you're coming in and probably shortly after getting finished, you're going to get trained up and you're going to go to one of those two places.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to do that, it became a really stressful environment to operate in, So.
I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine trying to I'm sure you had the people that wanted to go. And then
yeah, but those weren't always the people that were qualified to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Because a lot of people think at that time it was so easy. It's difficult. I mean, you guys know it's difficult to get into the service.
Yeah.
I don't know what the standards are now. I've been out for like 8 years now. So
I just got out the other day.
Just the other day. But the times that I was in, like it's difficult to qualify. A lot of people think that they'll accept anybody. It's not. I mean, even during that time, testing, like the military popular whatever the term is, um, unpopular to beliefs, you know what I mean? Uh, like people that the military want are highly qualified people. They
Mm,
want intelligent, athletic, smart people in the military. They don't want people that are going to cause trouble. They don't want people that are already necessarily lazy and out of shape.
Right.
Like, they'll take people if they qualify for that, but ideally, they want people that are gonna apply to go to ranger school. Every single person. Like, I want every person to wanna go to ranger school. Like, ideally, I think if I was a military person, that's the type of person I would look for. I want every person to be like, "You know what? I want that leadership school. I wanna go to ranger school because that's the type of motivation, because if you have that type of person, then you're gonna have a great soldier, you know what I
mm,
mean? But when you got that guy that you gotta try to convince, "Hey, man, like, I understand you're 10 pounds overweight and, like, you need to run and you don't wanna run, but, like, your physical fitness is important to the overall mission success.
Hmm.
Your endurance, your physical strengths, your mental strengths are all tied together." You know what I mean? And just that simple thing of being overweight, even though it seems like it's a ridiculous thing, ties so many more things together, you know?
No, it's
yeah,
shit.
personal discipline.
Yeah.
You know, I
Right.
mean, it personal and it affects your mindset. You know, it's all encompassing. So I would suggest folks get to the gym.
Why are you getting big eyed when you're looking at me, man? You cut your camera off. I know. I've been slacking.
No, it's
Yeah.
hard. I think I think that you hit on some really great points. And so you said, you know, you just got out about 8 years ago. Why don't you take us through that transition? You know, where were you at that point in your career? And obviously, I would imagine you put in for retirement.
Yeah, so, when I previous to moving down here, I was at Fort Campbell. I had been trying to, like I said, a little bit earlier in speaking, I knew I was gonna be in recruiting for a pretty long time, and I always stayed, in, like, the operational part of recruiting. I never went to a staff position. I never went to a school position. I never got to go to a training position. I never got to do anything other than actually recruit or lead recruiters. And if for 15 years, I did that. And so, well, I recruited, and then once I became a cadre recruiter, then, like, it literally stayed operational the entire time. I went from a small recruiting commander to a little bit larger recruiting command center to a little bit bigger center. And then from there, I wanted to do something different. I was like, listen, I've ran, I think at that time, 5 recruiting centers at that point all over the Midwest, and I wanted to do something different, and, so I tried to get to, recruiting for Delta Force, and, at that time, that's when I started training, jujitsu,
Gotcha.
and so, in training jujitsu, so go back a little bit further. When I started coaching wrestling, when I switched to be a cadre recruiter, I moved towns to a different town, and really, I moved to a different state. I moved down to Missouri, so I moved from Iowa to Missouri. Missouri still got really good wrestling, but it's different wrestling. It's a different style of wrestling,
Mhm.
and so I went from an Iowa style of coaching wrestling to a Missouri style of coaching wrestling, and my style that I'd been used to the last couple of years was slightly different than theirs. And I was an assistant coach, so I tried to support the coach as much as I can. But he was trying to show like the most advanced moves, and I'm a high level fundamentals guy. I'm a feeling if you get really really good at fundamental anything in
It's
life,
that military in you,
you're
bro.
you're gonna do okay. But when you
Yeah.
start focusing on things that are like flashy and things like that, and you get away from the fundamentals, you kind of lose focus a little bit. So that was frustrating to me on that coaching level. And then I finished recruiting there, moved to another town in Missouri that was even further away from that Iowa style wrestling. And then when I got coaching there, it got to the point where I wanted to be done with coaching anymore. And I just happened to have a guy that worked for me at that recruiting center that was working at it in an MMA school. And one of the guys that was there was getting ready to fight against another wrestler, and he wanted to work on some takedown defense stuff. And so he's like, "Hey, can you come and help work on some stuff with him?" So I did, and really enjoyed it, had a good time. And the coach was like, "Hey, why don't you come and start training?" And I was like, "Well, as soon as I finish up the season, I will." And so literally I stopped coaching one day and hopped into start training jiu-jitsu or submission grappling the next day. I ended up fighting. I didn't want to. I just wanted to grapple with people. I wanted to wrestle and get back to competing, but it was an MMA school and they were focused on
Making
making
fighters.
fighters,
Yeah.
which I mean was great. And they were like, "You should be doing this." And I'm like, I don't think I want to. But I ended up fighting a bunch. And then I moved again to another town and had one last MMA fight. And that town that I moved to had regular jujitsu. It wasn't just an MMA gym. It wasn't just a no gi place. It had structured jujitsu and it had like gi jujitsu and no gi. And it was but that was in like 2007, maybe 2006. So, I mean, really, really early on in jiu-jitsu. There wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of jiu-jitsu in the United States still at that point. Not a lot of black belts too.
Well, MMA was still kind of underground,
In
right?
in it well, not really underground, but it was still really in its infancy. A
Okay.
lot of places only had amateur or they didn't have amateur. Some places it wasn't even regulated. So, um, I moved down there and started training regular gi jiu-jitsu. And that's when I really kinda fell in love with that portion of the art. Training in the gi, and I mean, I had a wrestling background, and a lot of people thought that I'd be more swayed towards no gi, but I don't know what it was. I just liked the aspect of gi jiu-jitsu. And so, from there, I moved to Albuquerque. From Albuquerque, like I said, I'd ran a bunch of recruiting centers at that point
So you were recruiting in Albuquerque?
in Albuquerque. Yeah. So I'm when I started
How are those numbers?
the I'll get there. And so because I started fighting, the problem was MMA was starting to become popular at that time. But it also was at the height of recruiting for two wars,
Okay.
that 2006 timeframe. So I needed the jujitsu as a form of stress relief for me.
Mm.
But my command didn't need jujitsu as a stress relief for me. They needed me focused on other
Push.
things.
Yeah.
And so when I'm getting stress relief from jujitsu to be able to not go crazy, they're trying to make me crazy. And so what eventually ended up happening, remember I told you I did end up winning a fight, but I ended up fighting and they were all on weekends. So it never interfered with any job or position or duty or anything that I had. But at that time, we were working like the most insane hours that you could ever imagine. Like you could talk to any recruiter, anybody that was ever in recruiting, and they'll talk to you about crazy hours. But if you want to talk to like crazy, crazy hours, talk to anybody that led a recruiting station between the years of 2005 and 2008, and they're going to tell you how crazy those hours were.
I remember the recruiters because I got recruited in 2005, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I remember I had already weighed in. I remember going to a fight and my commander called me and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm on my way to something, ma'am. I said, "Why?" She said, I know where you're going. I said, "Okay." She said, "If you get hurt," she goes, "it's not going to be in the line of duty." And I said, "Well, ma'am," I said, respectfully, I was like, "There would have to be an investigation first, and then I would have to be found not in the line of duty, but I'm not doing anything that's damaging anything in the line of duty." I was getting ready to go to an MMA fight. I was going to be participating in an MMA fight. Well, the problem that I had was I had leaders that out of one side of their mouth, they were bragging about how they had a guy that was an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And on the other side of their mouth, they were bad mouthing me about how I took so much time away from work. At 8 p.m. is when I would start my training. Like literally, I wouldn't be able to start training until like 8 or 9 p.m. at night because that's the time that I would get done. Or I could train at like 5 o'clock in the morning because I would have to be in the office by 7 a.m. So I'm like, we're talking working hours from 7 to 9, like working like just 7 days a week, pretty much those hours. And so the stress relief that came from it was like really rewarding. But then on the other side, you've got one person that you've heard bragging about the things that you're doing and accomplishing, not only at work, but on the extracurricularly,
Yeah.
but they want to have so much micromanaging control of you. They won't allow you to do anything mentally clearing. You know what I mean? So it was really a difficult time for me at that point. And so I got kind of sent to Albuquerque for punishment. I was trying to go to Delta Force recruiting because at that time, like I said, I'd led a bunch of different recruiting centers at that time. Uh, my sergeant major's like, I understand you want to go to Delta recruiting, but I got something better for you. And I'm like, I'm sure you do.
I bet that's his
Yeah.
voice to the T too, ain't it, man?
I mean, I've always been known for really good impersonations, and that one's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
And so he actually had been sent there because he had as a rehab assignment. And then later on, he ended up getting in trouble again and getting kicked out, from what I understand. But he sent me to Albuquerque. And when I got down there, I told them, like, I'm a professional, but, I realized that I'd been
Swindled.
swindled a little bit at that point. And so I told the guy that was down there, I was like, listen, how I operate, you're going to get 100% from me. But I got goals of things that I want to accomplish. Continuing to run recruiting centers time after time after time is not one of them. So I'm going to be here the minimum time that I'm going to be here. You're going to get maximum effort. But the first opportunity that I have to leave, I'm leaving Albuquerque. And, at that time, they're like, yeah, okay. But, I'd been in recruiting by this time 7 years.
Wow.
So
Oof, man,
I'd made relationships. Running that many recruiting centers, I'd made so many relationships at higher command. Like, I started to negotiate. Hey, they kind of knew, why did you get sent down there, Brian? That didn't seem like that would have worked out. And so I started to, all right, hey, what's the minimum time I need to be here? This. Okay, let's start working on another assignment as soon as I can. So I started applying for places, tried to get back to Delta recruiting. I went in and interviewed. I had the wrong attitude for what they were trying to do at that time. I think I had a little bit too much of an ego for recruiting for them. Or they thought I had too much of an ego because when I went there, or when I tried to go there, they were like, my battalion commander blocked even the interview. Like, I had a TDY, I had orders and all that for the interview, and he's like, no, you know what, you're not going to go do that. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I've got these orders. He's like, no, I don't think so. And so he literally blocked me from going to do the interview. And so then I contacted another person, and I did an interview for the SOAR, Special Operations Recruiting. And so at that time, I was wrestling. I was really, really physically fit. And a lot of recruiters are known for not being physically fit.
Yeah.
And so when I interviewed for this job over there, I interviewed on the phone with a guy named Dave Ahola, who was a master sergeant and in charge of their operations. He ended up becoming a really good sergeant major. And he's like, what's your PT score? Stud. And I'm like, it's 300, sergeant. He's like, 300? I'm like, yep. I'm like, okay. And so then I ended up getting approved for that assignment. And I left Albuquerque almost to the day 12 months after being there.
Oh, yeah.
12 months.
You were counting it down.
I was
man.
working
12 months.
Yeah.
Well, because they screwed me on the previous assignment. You know how long that previous assignment was? 9 months.
Wow.
And you're traveling with family?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yep. I didn't want to go to that previous assignment, but I did because that's where my wife's family was from.
Mm-hmm.
And the sergeant major knew it. So he knew I wouldn't turn down that assignment. It was a shitty assignment.
Yeah.
And when I got down there, I said, I'm going to work for you guys, but I can't let that bullshit that was happening up at the other assignment follow me down here. They're like, oh no, we actually like that you're doing this. But then it turned into the same thing. As soon as it did, it was the same battalion sergeant major and everything. So I was like, look, I've been here in this battalion for 5 years. I've got to go someplace else. And they ran an exception to policy, kept me in the brigade and sent me to Albuquerque. But then long story short, I got orders to Campbell. And I thought I was going to go and become an SF recruiter because that's what the SOAR was, Special Operations Recruiting. But all I knew SOAR was Special Forces Recruiting, because when I was originally at Fort Lewis, the Special Forces recruiters would come around. So that's what I thought it was. So I called the 5th group guy and I'm like, hey, I guess I'm on assignment to come to you. He's like, you're not coming to me. And I'm like, I'm going to Campbell. He's like, well, you may be going to Campbell, but you're not coming here. I'm like, where else would I be going? There's nothing else at Fort Campbell that I could be possibly going to. So I called the first one. I was like, hey, and his name was Matt Bohm. He was a EOD guy. And I said, "Hey, first sergeant," I said, "I just got off the phone." I think his name was Rusty Byers. I said, "I just got off the phone with Rusty, and he said I'm definitely not coming to Campbell, but I've got orders for Campbell. What's going on with that?" He's like, "Oh yeah, you're coming to Campbell, but you're not going to 5th Group. You're going to go to the 160th. You're going to go to the SOAR." And I was like, "What is the SOAR?" I had no idea anything about what the 160th was at that time. And so immediately it was like research phase. And so once I got there, I mean, I had to qualify for all of their training. I had to go through Green Platoon, I had to go to airborne school, I had to do all of that stuff. I deployed four times to Afghanistan, 2 times to Iraq with them, and in the effort of recruiting. So I got to do some really, really fun. And that was the best
In the effort of recruiting?
in the effort of recruiting. I'm one of probably, I think,
I had to make sure he's
no, I recruited in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, in Iraq, there was during that time there was a recruiting center that was in Kuwait, but there wasn't a recruiting center in Iraq. And I'm probably there's I think 3 of us that recruited all over Iraq, and we were all 160th recruiters. I mean, I think the Delta Force guys sent some guys or whatever, but as far as the SOAR and special operations recruiting, there were 3 of us that I believe recruited in Iraq. Period.
So tell us what the mission of SOAR is.
Uh,
Like, what are those guys doing?
Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They're basically the black helicopters. Night Stalkers Don't Quit. The movie Black Hawk Down. The radon, the mission to kill Osama bin Laden, or the mission to try to capture Osama bin Laden that ended up killing him. They flew the helicopters there. Their job is customer support for all of Tier 1 operators.
Yep.
He's in customer support.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
I mean, they are probably some of the most professional people I've ever met in my life, like in my life. I'm still really good friends with people that are stationed there, that have retired from there, that because when I got stationed there, 5th Group was there too, and they had a combatives room. Well, the 160 did too, but it was kind of near in their Green Platoon, and they used it just for their training stuff. But 5th Group used it for like, let's do some stuff, and it was right in the middle of post. So every day that I was on post, I taught or trained at 5th Group. So I basically became the like there was the main combatives guy that was there, John Rankin, but I was like just the jiu-jitsu guy. I went through the combatives schools and progression with that, but all I wanted to do was jiu-jitsu. So anytime I went there, I was like, let's train jiu-jitsu. I'd show as much as I can, train with as many people as I can. So I really made some good relationships that way. So I kind of had both sides of it. I had really, really professional people over here, but because I was starting to develop these relationships within the special forces community, I was able to kind of do some stuff later on too. Like I've got a team at Fort Bragg. I'm actually going there on Sunday, and we're going to do some work, but I've got a special operations team under me with the Henzo Gracie team there at Fort Bragg from that relationship that I cultivated back in like 8 to 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
That's quite a career. And Ben, just the hearing your story, especially your military story, has been very interesting and motivating. If you want to go roll somewhere, get choked out real quick,
right here, man.
but a little bit on that, I skipped a little bit, but I said there's like 3 of us that recruited in Iraq. Like I said, there was that center in Kuwait, but then once we started doing 2 fronts, they tried to bounce a recruiting center to Afghanistan. And there was a special operations recruiting center in Afghanistan for quite a while. And we went, the last trip that I took to Iraq was the site survey for the center going to Afghanistan. My first trip there was to determine where we were going to try to place that. Then I went 3 times after that. So that trip, the guy that went with me, we're probably one of the only few that recruited in both Iraq and Afghanistan. There's like 2 of us that have done that, I think. 2, maybe 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
That's craziness.
It's such a smaller community, you know?
So when one of the things that I've always heard about recruiters, and correct me if I'm wrong, man, but they say the suicide rate is high.
It's a very, very stressful situation with very, very little outlet. like very little outlet. You're in a community with very little resources that you would normally find on a post. You know what I mean? On a post, everything is right there close.
Right.
You need to go to the medical facility. It's a short mile drive away. You don't have to drive many miles to someplace. There, if you need a resource, you go to your resource guide. You look. You know, there's a phone number or a chaplain or a person that you can go talk to that's going to get you immediate help.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out in a community and you're in a stressful situation, you a lot of times don't have that immediate person that you can go to. And with those numbers, that 988 number and community warrant source and things like that are available nowadays to these guys, like that's amazing that they can immediately get on the phone with somebody and try to deal with it right off the bat. But for a long time, like you have no outlet. And that's why I found jiu-jitsu as that outlet. I needed something to take that stress and anxiety because it was driving me crazy. I remember when I got selected for special operations recruiting, and I specifically remember that this drive from the recruiting center. I was on Highway 25 driving along, and I was talking to my wife at the time, and she said, "You know, that job that you're getting ready to take, I don't know if I'm too excited about that." She goes, "'Cause it seems like it's gonna be a lot of travel and a lot of work." And I remember, like, almost screaming at the top of my lungs, and I was like, "Listen, I can't continue to do this anymore. I've done this for so long that I've gotten to a point in my life that I gotta find something different to do." And I was like, "And if you don't wanna do this with me, then I've gotta do it by myself because I can't continue to stay in this environment that I'm in." So, she moved with me, and she ended up loving it. We had a great time, but yeah, it was a difficult time, like, being a recruiter out in a community. Because, like I said, like, you're basically a one-man team out there on your own, and very, very little people to vent with, except your peers, and they're going through the same shit that you're going through,
Right.
and the boss didn't wanna hear about that shit, because the boss's boss definitely don't wanna hear about that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Damn. I never really put it in that perspective, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I know they were extra tough on you guys, like numbers, right? So okay, so let's talk a little bit about, man, you got out of the military.
Mhm.
What was the plan? Did you have a plan?
I had a plan from the day I got into the military about trying to get out of the military. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
And you took 20 years to execute.
Yeah, but
I
it took me, you know, yeah, right. But it took me 20 years to execute that plan because, like I said, every time I would look at what my options were. I was never, I mean, I was all in with what I was doing, but I was never so narrow on my options that I didn't look at everything. You know what I mean? So, like I said, when I got to that 11-year point, I knew that it made the best sense for me to stay in at that point. Or maybe it was like 12 or something. I was like, listen, it's going to be stressful, but if I've already done 12 at this point, I can definitely do 8 more. You know what I mean? And if I can do 8 more, the benefits from that the rest of my life are going to be worth the 8 years of whatever I got to put up
Yeah.
with. You know what I mean? And they have. Like, I mean, I don't have a regret of anything that I've ever done. I loved everything that I've ever done. I've loved every stressful situation that I've been in. They've developed me into the person that I am now. You know, I have zero regrets of anything in my life. But you know,
Bravo,
it was tough. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah, that man, that's
So
amazing.
what was the plan when you wanted to
so
get
yeah,
out?
sorry. So
Okay.
what the plan was, each time that I went to reenlist, once I figured that I wasn't going to go back to school and be a teacher, I wanted to get back. I liked the military, and I liked that, but I wanted to do it more on a local community basis. Or I figured if I was going to get out of the military, I wanted to transition that service from a national service to a local service. So I wanted to be in law enforcement. And so each time I would look, do I want to get out and be a cop now or stay in? No, I'm still enjoy doing this. This is still the path that I want to go. That will always be there. You know what I mean? I qualified for that. I was not going to not qualify for that. So I knew that I met those qualifications that if I qualified for one of them, that I could find a job literally anywhere. You know what I mean? Because they're always looking for law enforcement officers. And so finally, when it came time, I was here in Houston, and I was going to move back to um, Tennessee, and I had an academy back there that that was being ran kind of like a club. It was called Clarksville Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. It's now Henzo Gracie Clarksville, but it was within this other current partner is within his business, so we'd pick up mats, put them down. So it's kind of like clubbish, you know what I mean? Not like a regular school or an academy. And so when it got to that point, I was going to move back there. We were going to kind of turn that into an academy. I was going to work as a cop and just do that the rest of my life. And I was teaching at an academy here in town. And a lot of cops and a lot of military are like, absolutely do not do that. Don't do that. don't get out and become a cop. And I was like, well, that's what I want to do. And so I had a group of people or a couple who I taught their younger son approached me and they're like, hey, they were Navy, both of them, prior service. They said, hey, we think you've got some pretty good capabilities of running your own school. If you ever wanted to consider that, we'd be interested in investing in you and in doing that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was like a shock to me, like a complete shock to me. I was like,
it's got to be an amazing feeling, man.
I was like, you're going to invest in me? And they're like, yeah, like we think that you would do a really good job with this. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I got to think about that. So I went back and, I was still married at the time. I talked to my wife and she's like, I really, I know that was the plan to move back to Tennessee and I'd love to do that, but I really like Houston and I like Houston too. I mean, it's so diverse. It's an amazing city. Like
we know.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like as soon as I found Houston, it was like, oh, I get a chance to stay. I could stay here. Like, oh yeah, let's do it. I mean, I don't really want to leave Houston. I mean, it's amazing. It's a great town. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up staying, open up a jiu-jitsu academy. And as soon as I opened up that one, the other one became one too. So then it was two. And then it just went on from there.
So how many do you got right now?
A couple.
Yeah. And you're opening one up here.
Yeah. There's actually one here in Pearland that's getting ready to open up. Probably it's supposed to be done in like 2 weeks, but honestly, we're going to be rocking and rolling by the beginning of the month. So probably a month from today, we're going to be awesome in that spot. Yeah.
We're going to come by, check you out.
You need to. You guys need to train too.
Man, I'm going to choke him out.
Yeah, that's good. I'll show you.
All right.
No, yeah. And so I know you mentioned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Can you tell us a little bit more about We Defy and how you found your role with them?
So how I find my role with them was, again, through Jiu-Jitsu and competition. So maybe even it had to have been right before my official retirement date. Because my beard was still small then. That's what I base everything on.
Yeah.
I signed out.
My beard?
Yeah, right. I signed out on leave on December 11th, 2014, and that's when my beard growth started. You know what I mean? And it's not been like everybody's like, how long did it take you to grow that? I was like, well, I trim it a bunch. So, but I met Alan Shabaro then
too.
Yeah, right. I met Alan Shabaro at the Houston Open at a tournament. We competed in the finals against each other, and he had an insignia on his gi that represented Special Forces Group, 3rd Special Forces Group, and a specific unit within that group. And I was like, hey man, like I'm still currently I'm almost out. And he didn't want to hear any of that at that point. And we kind of talked a little bit after the match, and one of his really very, very good friends is Tyler Broussard, and he's a really good friend of mine. So I was like, Tyler, you're friends with him. I'm friends with you. Like I want to get connected with that guy. If he's another veteran, like and he does jujitsu, like I want to know him, you know what I mean? And I want to get connected with him. And at that time they were doing stuff with Mission 22, veteran suicide was so high, and I was getting out, and I was like, I want to be a part of that too. And so, and I try to get myself invited into that through Tyler. I'm like, Tyler, let me help through jujitsu with what you guys are trying to do with Mission 22. So there were like 5 of us that would go around: Tyler, myself, Alan, Pete Wilhelm, Chris Howder, who is one of the Dirty Dozen in jiu-jitsu, like the 9th person to ever be, and 9th American to be promoted to black belt, and just an amazing human being, would go out and do seminars with us to help. Kurt Osiander, which was a really popular guy for a while, would go and do these seminars, and literally we would travel over as many seminars as we could do and as we could set up, we would try to do. And as much awareness and as much merchandise as we could sell and as much funds as we could raise for the the mission, or for Mission 22 to raise awareness for veteran suicide, to try to do something about it. And all the money that we were raising was going to a bunch of different programs. And I've brought this up like probably 3 times over the last like 2 weeks. But my assessment, this is what I assessed out of what I think was happening. Joey, who is a triple amputee, Joey Bosick, and Alan had come together to kind of start a foundation called the We Defy Foundation. But it was really kind of in its infancy. You know what I mean? They had identified something, and they saw something that they could do really, really great with. And we were kind of doing this one project, and they wanted to give this other project some more emphasis because we were doing all these seminars and we were in jiu-jitsu, but the money was going to other projects. And I think that they wanted to use jiu-jitsu to raise money for jiu-jitsu, back into jiu-jitsu. So they took the We Defy Foundation, and we started doing seminars and fundraising for that. Mission 22 had reached a point where it didn't need us doing monthly seminars. Well, I mean, it always appreciated that, but the fundraising effort had grown a lot more significant at that point. So the need for, I guess, small fundraising events, although raising awareness around the United States, the return on investment for it wasn't as great as what it could be. So they turned the effort, and I did as well, into starting to raise funds for the We Defy Foundation, because that was taking money and putting it into a fund, and then doing something that I had found so rewarding the entire time that I'd learned that skill, the amount of stress that it could relieve from a person, and the power of what jiu-jitsu does. And so what the We Defy Foundation is, a 501(c) nonprofit, for nonprofit organization that uses the vehicle of jiu-jitsu to take veterans and to use that as a form of treatment and physical therapy to overcome a lot of things in life. There's no one magic pill that's going to fix everything, but I tell you what, there's no one single thing that has helped me more than jiu-jitsu has in everything in life. Not just it's made me a more humble person. It's made me a smarter person. It's made me a tougher person, a lot of things, a more confident person. But
And through all that too, jiu-jitsu is a way for you to grow a business.
yeah.
You keep showing up, you keep getting better.
Yeah.
There is an end where if you're serious enough about it, you can turn it into, your own gym, and now you're teaching others.
Yeah.
So you're spreading that message.
And now, and so you asked me how many gyms I have. So then it became, well, let's see what we can do to help others do the same thing. I had found something that I had worked for me. Mm-hmm. I've got skills. I can use those skills. Let's get on and put those skills to work. You know what I mean? So the time that I was in, all of that recruiting that I'd been doing, all that traveling that I've been doing, especially really, really where it came in when I was started doing special operations recruiting, because I was going post to post to post. But any place that had helicopters, I would go, like Iraq and Afghanistan, like literally any place they had. I mean, I went to Korea more times that I can count, and I found that I really loved that place. You know what I mean? I'd heard so many horror stories about it from that first assignment, and there was like, hey, you got to go to Korea for this recruiting trip. And I was like, man, it's going to fucking suck. Yeah. I went there and I was like, this is an amazing cultural place. You know what I mean? Like an amazing culture. And I went back as many times as I could. Hey, we got this Korea trip. I'm good. I'll go. Hey, you got to go to Japan on this one. No sweat. I'll go to that one too. You know what I mean? So at that point, it just became as much as I could learn about things. You know what I mean? I'd been sheltered, I think, in life growing up in the Midwest, not learning very much about culture, and then getting into the Army and getting to travel like most people and learning about things and making it different, But so then, like I said, it came back to, since I was bouncing around post to post to post and training at a bunch of different places, I made a lot of relationship with a lot of different soldiers that were in, you know what I mean? And on a similar journey to where I was at, maybe not in recruiting, but probably a regular military job, you know what I mean? And so by the time that they started getting out, they've got skills too. And they've got jiu-jitsu skills as well. And so let's see what we can do to make these two things go together. So there's only a couple of them that aren't. Most of my academies are partnered with another veteran.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah. So, damn, excuse me. Man, that's amazing. There's so much
value.
Yeah.
Knowledge.
Yeah. knowledge that you're man, I stumbled and stuttered and everything else. But there's so much knowledge that you're given, man, and it's the way that you speak about jujitsu is so passionate, man. The way that I feel like it's helped you. You say,
Yeah, it's funny, I try to listen to things now, I just wanna try to be smart, more educated, and I was listening to something earlier, I don't think it's in this one. I wrote this thing down because I thought it was I was listening to these guys on a podcast, podcasts I think are very, very
Yeah, they
valuable
are.
for
You heard it here.
learn no, for real, I mean, I think you learn a lot through a podcast, and one of the things that I wrote down that I thought was important is, where'd it goes? Oh, this is it. Um, it's like a jujitsu instructor. I'm trying to help mentor other jujitsu instructors, and I'm like, you're a life coach. You're interested in teaching personal growth and development, but you're using the power and the vehicle of jujitsu to lead that development.
Mm,
You know what I mean? So a lot of people don't think about that stuff that way. They're like, oh, jujitsu is this, jujitsu is that. But no, you're just using that to help people grow and develop. You know what I mean?
mhm.
You can use a lot of things, but I mean, it's tough to grow and develop as a person just lifting weights. My muscles will grow and develop. You know what I mean? I can grow and develop intellectually by reading a book, but how is that going to help all the other aspects? How's that going to put it to work? Like I said earlier, there's only one thing that I've found that has all the things that you can put into life that can really do those things, and that's jujitsu. It's, I don't know, crazy.
No, it's a great metaphor for life and the
Yeah.
driver. And like we all have a goal,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, but what do you do when you get to that goal?
Yeah.
But jujitsu is the same way. Hey, you want to get to that next belt?
Yep.
Great. Now you got to go apply that belt. Now you can go to the next belt. And even when you become a black belt, there's still more that you can do. And even when you get your own academy, your own gym, there's still more that you can do. There's further you can go inside the sport.
There's really no limit to anything that you can learn. Like once you're a student, you're always going to be a student. So
Write that one down.
I'm gonna check it out though. I'm definitely gonna look into it now. It's
hey,
funny.
but the thing about it is the back to the We Defy Foundation, it being a 501(c) and a nonprofit, and we're raising funds. What we were raising funds was for scholarships. The purpose of that foundation is because they know the value of jiu-jitsu through Alan and Joey, and they know everything that it can do. Because of the power of jiu-jitsu, they're trying to get people into jiu-jitsu. So I'll go back to that in a second. But what the We Defy Foundation does is it provides scholarships for disabled combat veterans. You don't have to be disabled in combat. You can just be a disabled combat veteran. I think right now the percentage is 85% disabled, but they provide a 1-year scholarship to any that qualifies through their application process. Any combat disabled veteran that wants to train jiu-jitsu, like any.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're disabled at what level. That one of the founders, and he's now our purple belt, is Joey Bosick. He's a triple amputee. He's missing both of his legs, a quarter of one of his arms, and the other one's not in the best shape either. He has the ability to use it, but he's got slight impairment on some of his fingers, and he gets out there and gets after it when he's training jiu-jitsu. He's one of my best friends. And his cohort is Alan Chabarro, who's one of the most biggest intimidating men in that you could meet. And so you got this dude, Joey, who is a triple amputee. That's like, once he gets out of his chair, he's like sitting on the ground. And then you got Alan, who's like 6'2" or something, like 240, towering over you. And you're like, it's like frickin' frack. You got these two guys. You're like, I'll choose this one. And then that's not the great choice. You know what I mean? Because Joey knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But those two guys, they realized what it could do, and then trying to get people on scholarship. And then going back to it, we moved from Mission 22 to raising funds for We Defy early on. And then we started doing that, as many seminars as I could set up. And the number was 2,500, because that's what it took on average to get a veteran a year's worth of training. 2 gis. They don't have to do anything but show up. Take all the stress away. Like, I give you everything you need. All you got to do is show up. And so, like, every $2,500 that I would raise, it'd be like one more veteran. But we weren't raising funds fast enough. As we had raised awareness with Mission 22, people knew the problems that we were having. So we were getting people applying to the We Defy Foundation at an extremely high rate, and we weren't raising funds enough to put enough on scholarship. So
wow.
we had a ton of people on the wait list at that point. And so we realized that we needed to do something. So I was the president of the foundation at the time. I had taken it as far as I could get it. So, Alan and Joey and I, I said that, like, look, there's no further, like, I've reached the limit of my ability at this point. You know what I mean? Intellectually, I don't know any more that I can do. I'm not smart enough to take this to the next level. So we've got to assemble a group of people that are smarter than us. You know what I mean? Then the three of us, we got to try to figure out who can take this and push this to the next level. And we nominated some people and we got board members. And over the last couple of years, a couple have switched out a little bit. But man, they've really got a great team assembled. And the We Defy Foundation is doing amazing things there. That they've raised the fundraising effort is amazing. They're always, obviously always looking for funds, but now they are funding 40 new athletes, 40 new veterans per month.
Wow.
Into jiu-jitsu programs.
Wow.
40 per month into jiu-jitsu programs. And all of those into certified training facilities that are vetted by the foundation. In order to become one, in order to train a veteran through the We Defy Foundation, you have to apply to be a certified training facility. And it just makes sure that you meet all the criteria. You understand that what you're getting, your facility is up to par with what could possibly be coming there. You know what I mean? We're talking about disabled combat veterans. So they may need wheelchairs access. They may need certain facilities. And we want to make sure that they want to make sure that they've got the right ones for the right veterans so they can place them in the right spot. Just the veteran jiu-jitsu community is growing tremendously. There's even another guy named Joey Zetke over in Austin right now. Although it's it's not really a local program. It's really nationally known, but he does a lot of stuff here locally in Texas just because he's here in Texas. But it's a nationally known program that he's taken even bigger because he's got some more funding. But it's called Veteran Jiu-Jitsu. And what they try to do is they take any academy that's got a veteran in it, and it's like, hey, let's have an open mat or a class that any veteran from anywhere, even if they've never trained before, can just come in and meet some people, train some jiu-jitsu, and kind of get together and have some camaraderie.
Yeah, because once you break that first, just get back in the mold.
Yeah, come back in, get back a part of the group, you know. And so both of those two programs right now are really doing some amazing things for veterans. Amazing things for veterans.
It's
so let's go, Raul.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We're gonna wait for his new Pearland location.
All right, so like 3 weeks. I'll see you guys in 3
weeks, man. You gonna be there?
I'll be there. Yeah,
I'll be there too. Then.
Oh, good. Got it recorded and everything.
Oh, shit.
Well, hey man, I really want to say thank you and appreciate you. So I do have one final question for you before I ask that, though. What are some ways that folks can get involved with if they want to follow along with your story? Do you have any calls to actions out there for everybody?
I guess if they want to follow along with me, I'm on Instagram quite a bit. It's just my name, Brian, and 2_ Marvin. The WeDefyFoundation.org is a very good foundation to, if you're looking for any corporation or any individual investor that's looking to do something that really gives back. And probably the thing that prides me the most about that foundation, it's an all volunteer foundation. There's not like, I think the number is 83 or 87 cents of every dollar's raised goes to a veteran or goes to that veteran. There's only like 17 cents that's used for like administrative things and getting merchandise and doing this and doing that. It's like
plus the geese and stuff like that.
But even on those things, even though it's a purchase, there's profit that's being made on it, and it's going right back into. So although it's an expense and it's technically not, it's really going right back to it because that money raised is going right back into the program. And every single person, the president, every board member, everything currently. I mean, they just had a retreat that we went on in Wilmington, Delaware, to get a group of leaders together and everything. And it's the foundation is getting to the point now where the next step is going to have to be transitioning into something more of a like a corporate type deal. It's getting to the point where it's too big to just be an all volunteer force anymore.
That's understood.
You know? So I mean, and that's an amazing growth in that from where Alan, me, and Joey were like, all right, man, we got to get this thing to the next level. And then they've brought it to the point where like, listen, we need somebody to
do this full time.
To do this full time. We can't take it as a part-time baby anymore.
Man, what a blessing.
Yeah,
Man,
so,
that's amazing. That's amazing.
There you go. Follow him at Brian _Marvin. Get involved with We Defy Foundation. So, and as you know, Charlie Mike means continue mission. So my final question is, what does that term Charlie Mike mean to you?
Term Charlie Mike means to me is, no matter what, you've got to keep moving forward. There's no there. I teach kids jiu-jitsu, and the easiest thing for a kid to do in the face of adversity is to turn around, turn their back. And I tell those kids every single time I see it, I said, you've got to face everything in life head on. You can't turn your back on anything. So the only thing that you can do is face forward, face whatever's in front of you, and keep moving forward. So the suggestion that I would give to people is, even in the toughest time, there are people out there that are going to help you, and there are resources out there to help you. And that no matter what you're going through, you've got to continue moving forward. You cannot, under any circumstances, stop. You cannot, under any circumstances, get to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. You can. And on the other side of that is going to be relief. But you just got to have the confidence to know that, continuing that mission, carrying on is going to get you there. So that's the advice that I would give.
That's amazing, man. And my final question for you, Brian, is who's your freaking favorite baseball team?
That would be the Houston Astros.
Man,
Hello.
that's what I wanted to hear. Hey, with that, man, thank you. Really,
I really,
show,
appreciate
man.
you guys having me. It was great to meet you. I really, appreciate it. Thanks,
back,
guys.
man. Just so y'all didn't know, Brian is wearing a Houston Astros hat. So when you hear this on audio, that we like him. So with that, you guys, Charlie, Mike.